Paru, but your family is very synonymous in Compton. Talk a little bit about you joining the police force, your family in the police force, and how that even was that like a tradition in your family? Speak on that.
Yeah. Well, only second generation.
Okay.
Pops he actually became a police officer late in his adult. We call it late. Well, it was late back then. It's still early now, but he was like 28, 29 years of age when he became a police officer, and so that's something who always looked up to him, and that's my role model and my hero, and I did follow in the footsteps because of him. Wanted to be in the law enforcement, but prior to that, he was actually a basketball coach and worked for Southern California Edison prior to becoming a police officer in his adulthood.
Could you explain, back then when you were a police officer, some of the racial tension between, the police, and the Black and Latino communities? How was it out there in LA, Compton area back then?
Yeah, we was kind of a fortunate police department because it was only about 150 to 200 of us, and we had management that were Black. We still was 50-50, maybe even a little bit less, Black and white. It was very few Mexican officers. I think and I ended up leaving in like 96, and if they had 6 then, I would be surprised. Other 150 to 200 Mexican officers, and we always was pretty much 50-50 because the police department paid well, for all of the police departments in the LA County, Orange County area. Because that's generally what it's based on, is just pay, what you're paying, what your salary, what your benefits are. So most of the cops, the white officers did stay in the area. But what I meant by I didn't have to be subjected to all of that bullshit that other LA County officers had to be because as being a Black officer, because of management being, majority white, and you have to play the politics game or be the Uncle Tom or whatever, because, most of our administrators was Black as well, or at least half of them were.
Right. Explain the code, because we, hear about Tekashi 6ix9ine snitching. And then in the previous podcast, I talked about, even police have this, code of conduct, code of honor. Talk about that. And have you ever seen anything crazy? And how do police, do they tell on each other, or do they turn a blind eye? If you can, take us, a little bit behind that aspect.
I was in law enforcement in the 90s, man. And I'll tell you.
Got busy.
Yeah, it was crazy because Ronald Reagan had dumped all of that cocaine in our areas and stuff, so it made the streets crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's another story. But after Rodney King, man, and when you saw those CHP officers got on the stand, and I know most of our people don't know what I'm talking about because they're a little younger, but you had some CHP officers and LAPD officers that chased Rodney King, and the LAPD officers was the one to beat his ass, but the CHP officers was the one kind of initiated the pursuit and was standing around. They got on the stand and testified against the LAPD officers. And once that happened, that code blew, and people seen, and they had the trial and everything on TV, and that's what caused the riots and all of that. That's when cops, I think, in my opinion, understand that, hey, they'll put your ass in jail too if you do something wrong, that, management and supervision is not behind you like you thought they were.
Right. Talk about cops now and the stigma behind cops. Because I was listening to you talk on the podcast, one of your podcasts, and just the negative stigma that just goes behind police. And God and I were having a conversation as far as Black cops, and I want you to elaborate on this too, and their place in the police force. And both of us had a very hard time finding a spot for Black officers, but understanding it's a necessity for them, because if there isn't Black officers, who the fuck's gonna look like us out there to help at all? Get into that dynamic and talk about what you feel about how you feel about police in general now.
Yeah. Well, I still have ultimate respect for good police officers. I mean,
Word.
on both sides. I mean, what I meant by that is I don't work with guys that are gang members and all of that stuff, and so I have respect for gang members as well, the ones that ain't, pedophiles and just killers, just serial killers and all of that. But what I mean by good officers, motherfuckers that ain't out there because people always want to say, "Oh, you was a dirty cop," or "You was this or this," and the question I always ask them: Have you ever heard of me planting dope on anybody? Have you ever heard of me taking money or bribes? But just because I fraternized and was cool with niggas that I grew up with, that makes you dirty. And that's the stigma that people get, and that's the unfortunate thing about black officers is they have something in law enforcement called fraternization or fraternizing, and they hate for you to be cool with the people you're policing, and and live in the same community, which I feel, my father and I lived in the same community for a while that we were policing, because both my grandparents grew up in the city and raised and still, one of them died, but one of my grandmothers still lives in the city of Compton. And so you get this problem with people thinking everybody got to move out and be away and all of that. And they forget that you grew up with these people and all of that, and you're going to have relationships with people. Because they, had to sell drugs or do this, don't make them a bad person. And it's hard for white cops that from another county or another area to understand that, hey, I got relationships with these people. I know this nigga mama, his mother or his brother or whatever. I used to play baseball or basketball at the park with or grew up with. Generally, I was fucking on one of their sisters or something like that, or had, or wanted to.
Back.
The wife that I'm married to now, her brother was a big neighborhood Compton Crip dude. Still to this day, as a 40, 50-year-old guy can't claim a game, which we know is crazy or ludicrous, but he still, they go somewhere, he gonna throw up the in-hood Compton Crip sign or whatever. And that's what my wife, her brother, and when they have funerals and people that dies from their neighborhood, all that blue and all of that stuff come out. But that's their friends. That's what they grew up with. And so, but cops, man, for some reason feel once you become a cop, you got to disown everybody. And my whole thing and my thinking, luckily I had a father that kind of understood because he was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, but
we're gonna talk about that too.
Yeah, but his adulthood and from about being 12 or 13, he was in Watts and the Imperial Court housing projects, and so he knew all these people as well, and, because he grew up with them and all of that. But he was one of those type of person that always been like a social worker type guy, that personality of jovial guy. If y'all saw him on the Biggie documentary when he came running out of my grandmother's house in Compton, with the Broomfield documentary, you can tell he's just even Nick Broomfield called him a jovial guy. That's Reggie Sr., and that's him. And you have some cops like that. Some cops have a problem with it. But I'll tell you, when that shit get crazy and you need somebody to go and talk to the community because it's 200 cops in Compton. It's 100,000 people in there. And you can't police, 200 people can't police 100,000 people without having somebody to go and be able to talk to people when the heats get on. That's why we had riots and stuff like that in the past. There was nothing you really could do if people want to do a revolt or a takeover, for lack of a better word. Yeah.
Absolutely. How did you make the transition, from, being a police officer into, being a bodyguard, Suge Knight, Death Row? Can you take us into that time in your life where you made that transition?
Yeah. Well, what happened was, this happened I became a police officer working for the police department in 1985. I was real young, 19 years old. And I ended up retiring in 1996. But during that time in 1994, I had a traffic accident. So I was kind of looking for a way out because my ankle had got messed up, and I messed up my ankle in a traffic accident. But like I said, all the guys that was working for Death Row and around Death Row, I knew. I grew up with. These were dudes I played basketball, baseball. You know, Suge Knight and I played on the same high school football team. That's why we had a decent relationship and everything. And so it was an easy transformation for when he needed good armed security because of the incident that happened with Snoop, with the bodyguard that was really quote unquote, you know, he was good in martial arts and all of that, but he wasn't supposed to have a gun on him. And the liability when you start to make hundreds of $1 million that it will cost your company, having guys that are not trained are supposed to